Elena Torres had always been different from the others in her small hometown. While most girls her age talked about school, jobs, and family, Elena dreamed about uniforms, missions, and courage. Since she was a little girl, she admired soldiers, their discipline, bravery, and strength. Her father used to take her to military parades every year, and she would stand there with wide eyes, imagining herself marching among them one day. The sound of boots hitting the ground in rhythm gave her chills, and she promised herself, "One day, I'll wear that uniform too." But dreams weren't easy where she came from. People around her didn't believe that a girl could handle army life. They told her she was too soft, too emotional, too fragile. Even her relatives would laugh and say, "The army isn't for girls, Elena. Find a safer path." But Elena didn't want safe, she wanted purpose. She wanted to prove that strength wasn't about size or gender. It was about heart. After finishing school, she began training on her own. Every morning, she ran through the empty streets before sunrise. She did push-ups and squats behind her house, her hands bruised and knees scratched. When her friends went out for fun, Elena stayed home watching military documentaries and studying survival techniques. She wasn't the strongest or the fastest, but she was the most determined. She believed that persistence could beat natural talent any day. The day she finally got her acceptance letter into the army training camp, she cried. Not because she was scared, but because her hard work had finally opened the door she'd been knocking on for years. Her mother hugged her tightly, hiding her tears, and whispered, "Promise me you'll stay safe." Elena smiled and said softly, "I'll stay strong." The training camp was nothing like she had imagined. It wasn't like the movies, where everyone looked confident and sharp. It was chaos, dusty grounds, loud orders, and endless drills. The moment she arrived, she felt dozens of eyes on her. Out of 60 trainees, only 3 were women, and the atmosphere made that painfully clear. The men whispered behind her back, exchanging smirks as if she had walked into the wrong place. The first day began with a fitness test, running, climbing, crawling under wires. The instructors were strict and showed no mercy. Elena pushed herself beyond her limits, ignoring the burning in her legs and the sweat in her eyes. When she stumbled, she quickly got up. When she fell, she didn't complain. Still, she could feel the judgment in every laugh, every whisper. One of the recruits, a tall guy named Mason, joked loudly, "Careful, Torres. You might break a nail." The others laughed. Elena said nothing, but inside, she felt a spark ignite. A quiet fire that whispered, "Just wait." That night, when everyone was resting in the barracks, she sat on her bed polishing her boots and replaying every mistake she made that day. She didn't let the laughter break her. It became her motivation. She reminded herself why she came here, to prove that courage has no gender. Her body ached, but her spirit stood firm. The next morning, during roll call, the commander shouted, "From today, you stop being civilians. You're soldiers in training. And soldiers earn respect. They don't ask for it." The words hit her hard. She realized respect wasn't something anyone was going to hand her. She would have to earn it the hard way, through sweat, pain, and silence. Every day, she woke up before the alarm and began running laps before anyone else was awake. Slowly, even the loud ones started noticing her discipline. She didn't talk much, but her focus spoke louder than any words could. Still, not everyone accepted her. Some saw her effort as arrogance. Others waited for her to fail, so they could say, "Told you so." But Elena didn't give them that satisfaction. She knew something they didn't, that persistence always outlasts doubt. Then came the first weapon training session. Rows of rifles were lined up on the table. It was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The weapon wasn't just a tool, it was a soldier's identity. Each trainee was assigned one. When Elena's turn came, she received one of the oldest rifles in the batch. His barrel was scratched, and the sight was slightly bent. A few screws looked loose. She raised her hand to report it, but the armory sergeant smirked and said, "If you're waiting for a perfect rifle, you'll never fire a shot. Make it work." Laughter rippled through the room. Mason whispered, "Guess even the gun doesn't like her." Elena looked at the rifle in her hands. Felt heavier than it should. Not because of its metal, but because of the weight of their mockery. Still, she held it close, her fingers tightening around the grip. "All right," she murmured to herself. "Let's see what you and I can do." That night, she stayed behind while others relaxed. Under a dim bulb in the armory, she studied every inch of the rifle, cleaning, adjusting, and trying to understand its flaws. She refused to give up on it, just as she refused to give up on herself. When she finally put it down and looked out the window, the moonlight reflected off the weapon's dull surface. It wasn't perfect, neither was she, but both were built to fight, to endure, to rise again. And in that quiet moment, Elena made a silent promise. No matter how much they laughed, one day they would see what true strength looks like. Little did anyone know that broken rifle would one day make history and silence every laugh that once echoed across the training field. The morning sun was blazing over the training camp as the recruits lined up near the armory. It was weapon issue day, the moment every trainee had been waiting for. The smell of oil, gunmetal, and dust filled the air as soldiers collected their rifles one by one. Everyone was excited, joking, and bragging about how sharp their aim would be. For many, holding their first rifle felt like holding power. But for Elena Torres, it was the start of another test, one she didn't see coming. When her turn came, the armory sergeant handed her a rifle that looked different. The black coating was faded, the barrel had scratches, and the trigger felt stiff when she tested it. She looked through the sight, and her stomach sank. It was clearly off-center. The alignment was broken, and the sight wobbled slightly. It wasn't just old. It was damaged. Elena politely raised her hand. "Sir, I think this rifle's sight is misaligned," she said. The sergeant, a thick man with years of service lines on his face, glanced at her without much interest. "You think or you know?" he asked sharply. "I'm pretty sure, sir. The sight is loose." He walked over, grabbed the rifle and gave it a quick look. Then he shrugged. "It'll shoot just fine. Soldiers don't blame their tools, they fix them." The recruits nearby snickered. One whispered, "Guess she wanted a shiny new one." Another said louder, "Maybe she needs a pink one instead." Everyone laughed. Elena's face burned, but she didn't respond. She just nodded and took the rifle back. Inside, she was boiling. Not from anger, from determination. She told herself, "Fine. If this is the weapon they give me, I'll make it work better than all of theirs combined." During the afternoon firing drills, her struggles began. When others fired at their targets, most bullets landed close to the center. But when Elena fired, her shots were always off. No matter how carefully she aimed, the bullets veered slightly left. The sight was clearly misaligned, and the recoil felt uneven. Every shot drew more laughter. "Maybe she's cross-eyed," someone shouted. Another trainee added, "That broken thing suits her perfectly." The instructors didn't stop them. In the army, no one babysits you. Either you adapt or you fail. But Elena didn't complain. After the drill, when everyone headed to lunch, she stayed behind. She sat on the bench, staring at the rifle in her lap, feeling both frustrated and challenged. The weapon looked tired, the metal cold and worn. She whispered to herself, "You're not broken. You just need someone to understand you." That evening, while most trainees rested, she went to the small cleaning shed behind the barracks. It smelled of grease and old gunpowder. Under the weak yellow bulb, she laid her rifle on the table. Piece by piece, she took it apart carefully, the bolt, the trigger guard, the barrel, everything she could remove. Her fingers were black with grease, but she didn't stop. She cleaned it like she was nursing a wounded soldier. Every scratch told a story. Every dent showed that this weapon had seen things before her. It was no longer just an object. It was her partner, her responsibility. She didn't care if others laughed. She cared only that one day this rifle would fire straight, and she would be ready. By the time she finished, her hands were trembling with fatigue, but her heart was full. She reassembled it carefully and adjusted the sight by instinct. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than before. The next day, training resumed. The drills were tougher, longer hours, heavier loads, and less rest. During the next shooting exercise, her rifle jammed mid-session. The sound of metal clicking but not firing echoed loud enough for everyone to notice. Mason, the same recruit who mocked her earlier, laughed so hard he nearly dropped his weapon. Looks like her gun's as weak as she is. Even the instructor sighed. Torres, fix it or fall out, he barked. Elena's hands moved fast. She remembered what she'd studied last night. She cleared the chamber, ejected the jammed round, reloaded and fired again, all in seconds. The bullet hit near the edge of the target. It wasn't perfect, but it hit. The laughter stopped for a brief second. That tiny victory was enough to fuel her. She wasn't just fighting the training. She was fighting the opinions surrounding her. Every mistake became a lesson, every failure a chance to improve. At night, she continued working on her rifle quietly. When others slept, she tested her grip, her breathing, her aim. She would set up stones outside her barracks and practice dry firing at them just to align her sight and control her trigger pressure. Slowly, the weapon began to respond. The clicks were smoother, the recoil more predictable. The bond between her and the rifle grew, strange to others, but sacred to her. Days turned into weeks, and word spread that Torres and her broken gun were inseparable. Some still laughed, but others started noticing her persistence. She was always first on the field and last to leave. While others cleaned their rifles once a week, she cleaned hers daily. One afternoon, the instructor called for a surprise shooting challenge. The recruits were to hit 3 stationary targets in under 15 seconds. Elena's turn came last. Mason whispered to his buddy, "Watch the comedy show." Elena ignored him. She took her stance, breathed out slowly, and fired. Bang, bang, bang. 3 shots echoed through the range. When the dust settled, 2 of her bullets had landed dead center. The third was close enough to graze the bullseye. The instructor looked up from his clipboard, slightly impressed. "Not bad, Torres," he said flatly, but the corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. For the first time, the field was silent. No laughter, no comments, just a quiet realization that maybe, just maybe, the girl with the broken rifle wasn't so weak after all. That night, as she wiped down the weapon once more, Elena smiled to herself. The gun still wasn't perfect, but neither was she. What mattered was that both of them refused to give up. And deep down, she knew one day, this rifle would help her do something unforgettable. The days at the training camp grew tougher. The sun seemed hotter, the drills longer, and the instructors stricter. Every morning began with shouts, heavy boots hitting the ground, and the smell of sweat and gun oil. The recruits were getting stronger, faster, sharper. But for Elena Torres, every day was still a battle. Not just against the training, but against the mockery that followed her everywhere. Her broken rifle had become a running joke among the trainees. They called it Grandpa Gun, and laughed whenever it jammed or misfired. No one wanted to train next to her on the shooting range because her weapon made strange noises when fired. Clicked, popped, and sometimes failed completely. But what hurt more than the weapon's flaws were the looks she got from the others. The smirks, the rolling eyes, the whispered comments. "Torres, maybe your rifle's allergic to bullets," one recruit teased. Another added, "You should frame it and call it an antique." The laughter echoed in her ears, but Elena never replied. She kept her face calm, her eyes focused. Inside, she was building a quiet strength, a fire that grew stronger every time they mocked her. She knew one thing: one day, this same broken rifle would silence them all. Every evening after dinner, when most of the trainees went to relax or play cards, Elena slipped away to the armory. The old shed smelled of gunpowder, oil, and metal. It was quiet there, and she liked that. She laid her rifle on the workbench, her hands moving carefully, cleaning every part like it was something precious. She wiped away the dust, adjusted the sight with a small screwdriver she'd borrowed, and tested the bolt again and again until it moved smoothly. Sometimes, she stayed there so late that even the night guards got used to her routine. One of them, an older sergeant named Duran, noticed her dedication. One night he asked, "You still working on that old thing?" Elena smiled softly and said, "It's not the gun's fault, sir. It just needs someone to believe in it." He chuckled. "You sound like you're fixing a friend, not a weapon." She shrugged. "Maybe I am." Sergeant Duran nodded slowly. "Keep that spirit, Torres. The army breaks everyone once. What matters is who learns to rebuild." His words stayed in her mind for days. The next morning, when she stood in the firing line again, she felt different. Her hands were steady. She knew exactly how the rifle would respond. The others still laughed, but their words no longer reached her. When the whistle blew, she aimed and fired. Not perfectly, but better. The shots were closer to the center. The instructor noticed and raised an eyebrow. "Improvement," he said shortly, then moved on. But that single word meant the world to her. However, not everyone was happy with her progress. Mason, the same recruit who had been teasing her since day one, seemed bothered by it. During lunch, he sneered, "Don't think hitting a target once means you belong here. You got lucky." Elena just smiled faintly. "Then I'll keep getting lucky," she replied and walked away. That answer made Mason furious. He made it his mission to break her spirit. During drills, he would accidentally bump into her. During runs, he'd shout comments about how she was slowing the team. But no matter what he did, Elena didn't react. That silence bothered him more than any insult could. Over time, even some of the other trainees began to notice how focused she was. While they rested after training, she was out practicing her aim, her breathing, her stance. She didn't have the luxury of a perfect rifle or natural skill, but she had something they didn't: relentless willpower. One night, the wind howled across the open range as Elena practiced dry-firing her rifle under the moonlight. She set up empty cans on rocks and aimed silently, adjusting the sights again and again. Her fingers were sore, her shoulders ached, but she didn't stop. The moonlight glimmered on the weapon's scratched surface, and for a moment, it almost looked new again. Days passed, and the mockery slowly began to lose its power. The recruits still made jokes, but there was something different now, a hint of curiosity in their voices. They saw how she never missed a session, how she treated her weapon with care, how she improved little by little. It was becoming harder for them to laugh at someone who refused to quit. During a random inspection, the commander noticed her rifle on the cleaning table. He picked it up, turned it in his hands, and said, "This one's seen better days." "Yes, sir," Elena said respectfully. "Why not request a replacement?" She looked at him with calm eyes. "Because, sir, I don't need a perfect weapon. I just need to be perfect with it." The commander paused, then nodded slightly before walking away. That small acknowledgement was all she needed to keep going. By the fourth week, Elena's accuracy had improved so much that even Mason couldn't ignore it. During one practice, when she hit 3 bullseyes in a row, he muttered, "Must be luck again." Elena turned to him, smiled, and said quietly, "Luck is what happens when effort finally shows." The instructor overheard and gave a rare smile. "Well said, Torres." That moment marked a shift. For the first time, people weren't laughing at her. They were watching her. Some out of disbelief, some out of respect. Every night, as she cleaned her rifle, Elena thought about how far she had come. The broken weapon that once embarrassed her had become her strength. She learned its every flaw, its every weakness, and somehow made it work for her. She began to realize that her journey wasn't just about being a good shooter. It was about learning patience, resilience, and self-belief. The laughter, the broken rifle, the long nights, all of it was shaping her into the kind of soldier she had always wanted to be. And deep down, she knew her moment was coming. A test that would decide everything. The others didn't know it yet, but soon, they would see what a broken rifle could really do in the hands of someone who never gives up. The morning began like any other at the camp. Loud whistles, the sound of boots hitting the ground, and the echo of orders across the training field. But there was something different in the air that day. A kind of tension, excitement, and curiosity that spread like electricity among the recruits. Rumors were already going around before breakfast even ended. Something big was coming. When everyone gathered information, The commander stepped forward, his expression serious but proud. "Listen up, soldiers," he began, his voice booming through the open field. "This week, you'll face the final challenge of your weapons training, the flying target test." A wave of whispers rippled through the crowd. The flying target challenge was famous and feared. It wasn't just a regular shooting test. It was a real trial of focus, timing, and skill. The task was simple to describe but nearly impossible to complete. Hit a fast-moving aerial target launched into the air at over 100 miles per hour. It simulated shooting down a small drone or incoming object. Out of hundreds of recruits over the years, only a handful had ever hit it perfectly. Elena stood quietly among the others, her heart pounding. She had heard stories about this challenge, how it tested not just aim but nerves. A single mistake, even a blink, could make you miss completely. But she also knew this could be her moment, the chance to prove herself, not with words, but with action. The commander continued, "You will each get one shot, just one. Make it count." Mason, the loudest and most confident trainee in the group, grinned and whispered to his friend, "Well, that means Torres is already out. Her antique rifle won't even hit the sky." The group chuckled. Elena heard him, but she didn't turn. She just tightened her grip on her rifle and took a slow breath. The rest of the day was filled with preparation drills. Recruits practiced their breathing, posture, and aiming techniques. The instructors reminded them to calculate distance, adjust for wind, and fire between breaths for accuracy. Elena listened carefully, absorbing every word. She knew her rifle wasn't like the others. It was heavier, less balanced, and still slightly misaligned, but she also knew how it behaved better than anyone else knew their own. During a short break, Elena sat under a tree, checking her rifle again. She ran a cloth through the barrel, checked the sight, and made tiny adjustments using a small piece of wire she had kept hidden in her pocket. While others bragged about how easily they'd hit the target, she stayed silent, focusing on her weapon. One of the female recruits, Sarah, sat beside her. "You really think that old rifle can do it?" she asked, not mockingly, but curiously. Elena smiled faintly. "It's not about the rifle. It's about the person holding it." Sarah nodded slowly, impressed by her calmness. "I hope you're right," she said softly. Later that evening, as the sun set over the camp, the recruits gathered near the range to watch a demonstration. The instructors launched a small circular target into the air. It moved fast, almost like a blur, and disappeared within seconds. Even the commander missed his first shot. The crowd gasped. He reloaded, aimed again, and this time hit it perfectly. The sharp sound of the bullet connecting echoed across the field. "That," he said, lowering his weapon, "is what precision looks like." The recruits clapped, though many were now visibly nervous. If even the commander could miss once, what chance did they have? Mason, however, still looked confident. He puffed his chest and said loudly, "Piece of cake." That night, Elena couldn't sleep. The challenge played again and again in her mind, the speed, the pressure, the noise. She knew the next day would define everything. All the laughter, all the mockery, all the hours she spent fixing her rifle, it would all lead to this. She sat up in bed, took her rifle into her lap, and whispered, "We've come this far together. Let's finish this." The next morning, the entire camp buzzed with anticipation. Even instructors from other units came to watch. It wasn't every day that the flying target challenge happened. It was a test that separated ordinary soldiers from legends. One by one, the recruits took their turns. The first few missed completely. The target was simply too fast. A few others managed to graze it, earning polite applause. When Mason's turn came, the crowd went silent. He cracked his knuckles, grinned, and stepped forward. The target launched, and within seconds he fired, missing by a wide margin. The silence that followed was heavy. He laughed awkwardly to hide his embarrassment. "Wind messed me up," he muttered, but everyone knew it wasn't the wind. Finally, the instructor called out, "Torres, you're up." All eyes turned toward Elena. The air grew still. Some recruits whispered to each other, expecting a failure. Others were curious. After weeks of hard work, Maybe she'd surprise them. Elena walked forward calmly. Her boots pressed into the sand, her rifle steady in her hands. The morning light glinted off its scratched metal. She could feel the weight of every eye on her, but she blocked it all out. It was just her and her rifle now, the same one everyone had laughed at, the same one she had repaired night after night. The instructor looked at her. Ready. Elena nodded once. Ready. Target launching in 3, 2, 1. The small disc shot into the air, spinning fast, glinting in the sunlight. The crowd followed it with their eyes, but Elena didn't move yet. She waited. Her heart slowed, her breathing evened out. The world seemed to fall silent. She aimed, not through the sight, but through instinct. The same instinct built from endless practice, sleepless nights, and stubborn belief. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Bang! The sound echoed through the valley. The bullet cut through the air like lightning. A split second later, the target shattered midair into tiny pieces, raining down like sparks. For a moment, no one moved. The range was silent, completely silent. Then came the gasps. She hit it. No way. With that old gun? The commander stared at her, then at the shattered target, disbelief written on his face. Elena lowered her rifle slowly, her hands steady. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate. She just exhaled softly, as if she already knew this moment would come. And for the first time since she arrived at the camp, no one laughed at her. Not even once. The day of the final challenge arrived. The entire training ground was alive with energy and tension. The air was sharp and dry, the kind that carried every sound, from the crunch of boots on gravel to the clicking of rifles being checked and loaded. This was the day every recruit had been waiting for, the Flying Target Challenge. It wasn't just another test. It was the ultimate proof of skill and composure. Elena Torres woke before dawn. The camp was still dark and quiet when she opened her eyes, but she could already feel her heart pounding. She sat on her bunk, staring at the rifle resting beside her bed. The same old, scratched, heavy weapon that had been mocked since the day she got it. For a moment, she just held it in her hands, tracing the marks on its barrel. Each scratch told a story of her struggle, of failure, patience, and persistence. While the others slept, Elena cleaned the rifle one last time. Her movements were slow, calm, and focused. She checked the barrel, the chamber, and the sight that she had adjusted countless times. She whispered softly, "We're ready." It sounded strange talking to a weapon, but to her, this rifle was more than metal. It was proof of her endurance. When the first rays of sun touched the camp, the loud call of the commander broke the silence. All recruits, report to the firing range in 10 minutes. The barracks came alive instantly. Boots thudded on the floor, belts were fastened, and helmets were pulled on. Mason, as usual, made his presence known. He smirked as Elena passed by. "Don't worry, Torres. Maybe they'll give you a bigger target, like a barn." Laughter erupted from the group around him. Elena didn't respond. She just tightened the strap of her helmet and kept walking. The shooting range was set up at the edge of the camp, surrounded by desert hills. The targets were stored in small metal launchers that hurled them into the air at incredible speed. The wind was picking up, making the task even harder. Dust danced in the air, and the sun was already blazing. The commander stood before the line of recruits, his voice strong and serious. "Each of you will step forward when called. You get one bullet, one chance. There are no repeats, no excuses. Remember, precision isn't about power. It's about patience." The first few recruits stepped up one by one. Most missed completely. The targets moved too fast, and the sunlight made it hard to see. One trainee grazed the edge of the target, earning some applause. Mason stepped up next, confidently twirling his rifle before aiming. The target launched, spinning, flying high. Mason fired. Bang! The bullet missed by several feet. A disappointed murmur ran through the crowd. Mason cursed under his breath, pretending not to care. Elena watched quietly from the back. Her palms were sweaty, but her eyes were calm. Every miss before her only reminded her how difficult this test really was. Yet deep down she wasn't afraid. She had trained for this moment in silence, long after everyone else had gone to bed. Finally, her name was called. Torres. The range went quiet. The other recruits exchanged glances, some grinning, expecting another failure. Mason muttered, "Here comes the comedy show." Elena stepped forward slowly. Her boots left small prints in the sand. She adjusted her grip on the rifle, feeling its familiar weight. The wind brushed her face warm and dry. The instructor handed her a single bullet. "Make it count," he said. She nodded once, loaded the bullet, and closed the chamber with a click. The sound echoed softly in the tense silence. The commander gave the signal. Target launching in 3, 2, 1. A small, round metal disc shot into the air. It spun fast, catching the sunlight like a flash of silver. Every pair of eyes followed it. Elena didn't rush. She tracked it with her eyes, not her scope. She had learned that her rifle sight was slightly off. Trusting it now would mean missing the target. So she trusted herself instead. Her breathing slowed. The noise around her faded. In her mind, it was just her, the rifle, and the sky. She exhaled gently and squeezed the trigger. Bang! The sound cracked through the air. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a metallic clink echoed, followed by a burst of fragments raining down from the sky. The target had shattered into pieces. The silence that followed was louder than any shout. Every recruit froze, eyes wide, mouths half open. Even the commander didn't speak at first. He just stared at the falling pieces of the broken target glimmering in the sunlight. Mason blinked in disbelief. "No way," he muttered. Elena lowered her rifle, her heartbeat steady. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate. She just looked up at the sky where the target had been, then down at the rifle in her hands. It wasn't luck. It was trust, patience, and relentless effort. Finally, the commander walked forward, his boots crunching on the sand. He stopped in front of her and asked, "Torres, what sight did you use?" Elena looked at him respectfully and replied, "None, sir. I used instinct." The commander studied her for a moment, then gave a single nod. "Outstanding." And with that one word, the silence broke. The crowd erupted not with laughter, but with applause. Even the instructors nodded in approval. Elena stood still, the wind brushing her hair, her rifle resting at her side. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The same people who had laughed at her for weeks now looked at her with awe. As she walked back to her spot, Mason avoided her eyes. Sarah, the other female recruit, smiled proudly and whispered, "You did it." Elena only replied softly, "No, we did it," glancing at her rifle with gratitude. That moment became the talk of the camp. The girl with the broken rifle had done what no one else could. She hit the target no one could touch. And though she didn't show it outwardly, inside, Elena felt something shift. All the pain, all the jokes, all the long nights of practice had led to this single shot. It wasn't just about hitting a flying target. It was about proving that strength isn't about having the best tools. It's about never giving up, even when everything around you tells you that you can't win. That day, Elena Torres didn't just hit a target. She hit a moment of truth. And the echo of that single shot stayed in everyone's memory long after the smoke cleared. The shooting range was still filled with dust and echoes from Elena's unbelievable shot. Everyone stood frozen, some still staring at the sky as if trying to believe what they had just witnessed. A few seconds later, the silence broke into murmurs. Disbelief, admiration, and shock mixing together like a wave rolling through the crowd. Elena, meanwhile, stood quietly, her hands resting on the same rifle everyone had called useless. The commander gave her a firm nod of respect before ordering the recruits to line up again. "No one leaves until the next round of results is reviewed," he said sharply. But his eyes still lingered on Elena for a moment longer, not out of doubt but curiosity. It wasn't every day a recruit hit an impossible target with a broken rifle. As the recruits stood in formation, Mason's proud expression had completely disappeared. His jaw was tight, and his eyes were burning with something between anger and embarrassment. For weeks, he had been the loudest voice mocking Elena, the one who joked about her old rust bucket rifle and called her lucky charm of bad luck. Now, in one moment, she had silenced him without a single word. When the commander dismissed the group, the recruits gathered around Elena, not to laugh, but to ask questions. "How did you aim without using the scope?" one asked. "What's your trick?" another said, still wide-eyed. Elena gave a small, shy smile. "No trick," she said softly. "I just listened to what I'd practiced. When the rifle broke, I learned to adjust my sight, not replace it." They didn't quite understand what she meant, but they could sense the depth behind her words. Mason walked past her without looking, shoving his rifle into its case. His pride had been shot down more harshly than any target. But there was someone else watching quietly from behind, Captain Reynolds, one of the senior instructors. He was a tall, calm man known for spotting hidden potential among recruits. He didn't cheer or applaud. He simply studied Elena as she packed her gear, the way she moved with care and precision, the way she handled the rifle like it was a living thing. Later that evening, when the sun dipped low and the camp was glowing orange, Captain Reynolds found Elena sitting by herself near the edge of the range. She was cleaning her rifle again, using an old piece of cloth, humming softly to herself. "Private Torres." His deep voice broke the quiet. She quickly stood up and saluted. "Sir." "At ease," he said, waving a hand. "You gave quite a performance today." "Thank you, sir," she replied, unsure of what else to say. Reynolds crouched beside her, looking at the rifle on her lap. "This is the same one that jammed during training, isn't it?" "Yes, sir," Elena said. "I fixed it as best as I could, but it still misfires sometimes." He nodded slowly. "And you still trusted enough to take a shot like that?" She looked at him, then at the rifle. "Sir, I learned to trust what I can control. My hands, my focus, my patience. The rifle, it's not perfect, but neither am I. We work together." Reynolds smiled faintly, the kind of smile that showed genuine respect. "That's a rare answer," he said. "Most recruits would have asked for a replacement or blamed the equipment. You adapted instead." For a moment, the wind carried only the soft sound of desert sand shifting. "Private Torres," Reynolds continued, "I want you to report to the special training unit tomorrow morning. There's a test coming up, advanced marksmanship assessment. I think you'll do well." Elena's eyes widened. The advanced test was invitation only, reserved for the top 2% of recruits. "Me, sir? Are you sure?" "I don't waste my time guessing," Reynolds said. "Be there at 0600. He walked away, leaving her standing still, holding her rifle tightly. Her heart felt full not of pride, but of something deeper. After months of humiliation and doubt, someone had finally seen her for who she really was. That night, the campfire crackled softly as the recruits gathered for dinner. The energy around Elena had completely changed. The same people who once rolled their eyes when she passed were now offering her their seats, asking her for tips, even joking with her kindly. Sarah grinned and nudged her, whispering, "You know, they're all scared of you now." Elena laughed softly. "Good," she said. "Maybe now they'll aim better." Even Mason, sitting alone in the corner, couldn't ignore her anymore. He didn't apologize, not yet. But when she walked past, he gave a small, silent nod. It wasn't friendship, but it was the beginning of respect. That night, while everyone slept, Elena stayed awake for a long time, lying in her bunk. She stared at the ceiling, her thoughts spinning like the flying target she'd shattered. Her life had always been about proving herself, not to others, but to the small voice inside that sometimes whispered, "You're not enough." That voice had been loud when she first arrived at camp. But after today it was quiet, almost gone. She reached for her rifle, which rested beside her bed, and smiled. "We did it," she whispered, just like she had that morning. Outside, the wind whistled softly through the camp, carrying with it the faint echo of her bullet striking the target. A reminder of what determination could do when everything else failed. The next morning, before dawn, Elena woke again, ready for whatever came next. She didn't know what the advanced test would bring, or whether she'd succeed. But she knew one thing for sure. She would walk onto that range with the same broken rifle and the same unshakable spirit. The laughter, the doubt, the pain, all of it had turned into her fuel. And somewhere deep inside, she knew this was just the beginning. Because once you prove yourself when no one believes in you, nothing can break you again. Elena Torres had arrived at the camp as the girl with the broken rifle. But after that day, she became something far greater. A symbol of grit, patience, and quiet strength. And while everyone else went to bed thinking about the next test, she was already living the lesson that no one could teach. You don't need a perfect weapon to make a perfect shot. You just need an unbreakable will. The next morning came quietly. The desert sky was still dark when Elena woke up. The camp was asleep, but she couldn't rest. Her heart was too full of excitement and nerves. The advanced marksmanship assessment was in just 2 hours. She had never been part of something so important before. This wasn't just another test. It was a chance to prove that her success yesterday wasn't luck. It was skill. She sat up on her bunk, rubbing her eyes. The air was cold, and she could see her breath as she spoke softly to herself. "All right, Torres, one more shot." She reached for her rifle, the same one she had cleaned a dozen times the night before. It wasn't shiny or new, but it was hers. A part of her story now. The camp slowly started to come alive as dawn touched the horizon. Recruits moved around sleepily, yawning and stretching. But today, everyone's eyes were on her. Elena could feel it. She didn't walk like the nervous rookie they used to tease. She moved with quiet confidence now. The whispers followed her. Some full of admiration, some of disbelief. By the time she reached the training ground, the golden light of the morning sun had spread across the desert. Captain Reynolds was already waiting there with 2 other instructors. They were setting up what looked like a new range, longer, more complex. Instead of the simple flying targets from yesterday, these were moving at unpredictable angles, twisting and diving through the air. Reynolds looked at her as she approached and said, "Private Torres, you're early." She straightened up and replied, "Early is on time, sir." That earned a small nod of approval. "Good answer," he said. Then he gestured toward the targets. "This assessment isn't about hitting just one target. You'll face 5, each one faster than the last. You'll have 1 bullet for each, no second tries." Elena felt her throat tighten a little, but she didn't flinch. "Understood, sir." The other recruits were allowed to watch from a distance. Mason was among them, his expression unreadable. Sarah gave Elena a thumbs up and mouthed, "You got this." The first target shot into the sky. Elena lifted her rifle smoothly, aimed, and fired. The bullet sliced through the air and struck the target cleanly. Perfect hit. The instructors exchanged impressed looks. The second target launched immediately, faster this time. Elena adjusted her position, her feet grounding firmly in the sand. Another shot, another hit. The third target curved midair, almost mocking her. She waited a split second longer, reading its movement, and fired. A direct hit again. The recruits behind her started murmuring in awe. 3 perfect hits in a row. But the fourth target was different. It shot high, then dropped suddenly. Elena pulled the trigger. Click. Nothing. Her rifle jammed. The moment froze. The same old flaw, the one that had caused her so much humiliation in training, had returned at the worst possible time. For a split second, she saw it all slipping away. The laughter, the failure, the shame, could all come back with one mistake. But instead of panicking, Elena took a deep breath. She didn't think, she reacted. Her hands moved fast, clearing the chamber with a flick of her wrist, her fingers steady and sure. Within seconds, she was ready again. The target was almost out of sight, but she aimed slightly ahead of where it was falling and fired. Bang! The target shattered just before it hit the ground. The entire range went silent again. Captain Reynolds's face remained calm, but his eyes lit up with pride. The recruits erupted into cheers. Mason, who had been shaking his head moments before, now stared at her in disbelief. But it wasn't over. The 5th and final target was launched, faster and smaller than all the others. It moved unpredictably, like a bird in panic, spinning wildly through the air. The sun's glare hit her face, blinding her slightly. Elena narrowed her eyes, blocking out everything. The noise, the heat, the pressure. She focused only on the motion. Her heart slowed down, her breathing even. In that moment, everything else disappeared. She fired. The bullet cut through the air and struck dead center. The tiny target exploded into shining pieces, scattering against the bright blue sky like silver dust. The crowd of recruits broke into cheers and clapping. Even the instructors couldn't help but smile. Captain Reynolds walked up to her, standing tall and proud. "Private Torres," he said, "you've just scored higher than any recruit in the last 5 years." Elena blinked in surprise. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice steady but her hands trembling slightly. Reynolds nodded and continued, "That calm under pressure, that trust in your skill, that's what we look for in our elite shooters. You've earned yourself a place in the Special Forces Evaluation Program." The words hit her like a dream. For a moment, she couldn't even move. She had trained for months just to survive here, and now she was being recommended for something far beyond that. As the crowd cheered, Mason finally walked up to her. He hesitated for a moment before saying, "Torres, that was incredible." Elena looked at him, surprised. He rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "Guess I was wrong about you," he admitted. She smiled lightly. "Guess I was right about me," she replied, and they both laughed, a genuine one this time. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Elena stood at the edge of the camp again, her rifle slung across her shoulder. The wind blew softly, carrying the sound of training drills in the distance. She looked down at her weapon. The same old, dented, stubborn rifle that had been laughed at, dropped, and fixed more times than she could count. "Not bad for a broken one," she whispered with a small smile. For the first time, she truly felt proud. Not just because she had hit the targets, but because she had overcome every doubt, every failure, every laugh that once tried to define her. She didn't just prove them wrong. She proved herself right. And though she didn't know what challenges would come next, she knew she was ready for them. Because Elena Torres wasn't just the girl with the broken rifle anymore. She was the soldier who turned weakness into strength and silence into victory. The next few weeks changed everything for Elena Torres. What began as a quiet training journey had now turned into something much bigger. Her name spread through the camp like wildfire. Everyone was talking about the girl who hit the impossible target with a broken rifle and then aced the elite marksmanship test. But Elena never let the attention get to her head. While others celebrated her success, she stayed focused, training harder than before. Every morning, she was up before sunrise, out on the range when the world was still silent. Her rifle, scratched, old and worn, remained her closest companion. She didn't switch to a new one, even though she had the chance. When someone asked her why, she simply said, "This one taught me to never give up. I'll stick with it." Captain Reynolds often watched her from a distance. He saw how she worked, calm, determined, and without arrogance. One day, after her training session, he called her into his office. The room smelled faintly of oil and metal, and maps of operations were pinned on every wall. "Private Torres," he began, motioning for her to sit. "I have a question for you." She sat down, straight-backed and alert. "Yes, sir?" He leaned forward. "Why did you keep that rifle when you could have taken a new one? Most recruits would have." Elena thought for a moment before answering. "Because, sir, this rifle reminds me of who I was before I learned how to stand on my own. When it broke, I thought I'd fail too. But I learned that sometimes, what's broken can still aim true, if you learn how to work with it." Reynolds smiled slightly. "That's a powerful lesson, Torres. And that kind of thinking is exactly what we need on the field." He paused before adding, "Command has reviewed your performance. They're offering you a spot in a classified training program, one that prepares soldiers for real operations." Elena's eyes widened. She didn't speak for a few seconds. "Sir, me?" "Yes, you," he said firmly. "You've shown patience, control, and discipline. You don't rely on luck, you rely on learning. That's rare." She stood up straight, saluting him. "I won't let you down, sir." "I know you won't," he replied. That night, when she returned to the barracks, Sarah ran up to her. "I heard the news. You're joining the special unit, right?" Elena smiled softly. "Looks like it." Sarah hugged her tightly. "You earned it. Remember the first week? Everyone was laughing at your rifle. And now, they're all trying to shoot like you." Elena chuckled. "Yeah, I remember. Feels like a lifetime ago." The next few days were filled with preparation. Elena had to go through new briefings, health checks, and specialized drills. The new unit's training ground was tougher. Steeper hills, longer distances, and advanced targets that moved like real threats. But she didn't mind the challenge. Every drop of sweat reminded her of how far she had come. One afternoon, while practicing long-range shots, Mason approached her. For the first time, he wasn't mocking her. He looked awkward, almost nervous. "Hey, Torres," he began. I wanted to say something." She put down her rifle and turned toward him. "What's up?" He scratched the back of his neck. "I used to think you were holding us back. Guess I was wrong. You showed me what real control looks like. Respect." Elena smiled kindly. "Thank you, Mason. That means a lot. You've improved too." He grinned, relieved. "Well, trying to catch up with you isn't easy." From that day on, Mason's attitude changed completely. He started training beside her, and for the first time they worked together as equals. Their friendly rivalry pushed them both to improve. Weeks later, a special event was organized. A live demonstration for visiting officers. Reynolds selected Elena to represent the unit. The challenge: to hit 3 moving targets at extreme distances, each faster and farther than the last. As she stood on the range, dozens of eyes watched her. Commanders, officers, and recruits. But she wasn't nervous. She remembered every moment that led her here. The laughter, the doubts, the broken rifle, and the impossible shot that changed everything. She took her position, the sun shining behind her, wind brushing across the desert. Her rifle was steady in her hands, like an old friend. The first target launched, she fired. Direct hit. The second followed, faster, harder to track. She adjusted slightly and fired again. Another perfect hit. The third target was nearly invisible, a small disc flying against the glare of the sky. She took her time, heart calm, breathing slow. The whole camp was silent. Then she squeezed the trigger. Bang! The target shattered. The sound of applause and cheers filled the range. Even the senior officers stood up, clapping. Captain Reynolds walked up to her, pride in his eyes. "Private Torres," he said. "That was flawless." She lowered her rifle, smiling humbly. "Thank you, sir. I just did what I was trained to do." Reynolds looked at her rifle, then at her. "You know," he said, "maybe it was never the rifle that was broken." Elena looked down at the old weapon, now gleaming faintly in the sun, and smiled. "Maybe not, sir." That night, as the stars filled the desert sky, Elena sat alone on the range. The sound of the wind carried faint memories, of laughter, of failure, of triumph. She knew her journey wasn't over. The real missions, the real tests were still ahead. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She had learned something powerful. Strength isn't about having the best tools or being perfect. It's about refusing to give up, even when everything seems broken. The same people who once laughed at her now looked up to her. Her story had become a quiet legend in the camp, the story of the girl who turned a broken rifle into a symbol of resilience. As she packed up her gear, she whispered softly, "It's not about the rifle, it's about the one who holds it steady." And with that, Elena Torres walked into the darkness, ready for the next chapter of her life. A soldier who had turned doubt into determination and weakness into unshakable strength.